Lena did not think about him every day. That was the thing she told herself every morning while she was making toast that always came out too dark, while she was finding Mira's left shoe, which was never where the right shoe was, while she was drinking coffee that went cold before she remembered it was there. She did not think about him every day. Some days she thought about him so hard her chest went hollow, and she had to sit down on the edge of the bathtub and breathe through her nose until the feeling passed. Some days she went 6, 7, 8 hours without his face coming up behind her eyes. Those days felt like winning a game she had never agreed to play. Mira turned 4 in October. Lena made waffles, the kind from the box, not the real kind. Mira had opinions about this. She had informed Lena multiple times, with the solemn authority only a 4-year-old can produce, that box waffles were better because they had the little squares, and the real ones didn't. Lena had not argued. She was not going to argue with a 4-year-old about waffle architecture. She had enough battles. She stuck a candle in the waffle, one candle, pink, shaped like a star, and carried it out while singing Happy Birthday badly on purpose, because Mira liked it when she sang badly on purpose. Mira blew out the candle, made a wish, wouldn't say what it was. Wishes are secret, Mira said, with enormous seriousness. You're right, Lena said. Wishes are secret. She cut the waffle into squares. She watched Mira eat with both hands, syrup on her chin, rabbit propped against the juice glass like a furry dinner guest. She did not think about him. The apartment was small the way Lena liked things to be small, manageable, contained. She could see every corner of it from the kitchen. The living room with its second-hand couch and the bookshelf she'd built herself from a flat-pack box, and 3 wrong turns with an Allen wrench. Mira's room, the door always half open. The bathroom with the dripping tap she'd been meaning to fix for 4 months. She had chosen it deliberately. Not because she couldn't afford something bigger. She could, now, after 3 years of working herself into the ground at the firm, after the promotion she'd gotten not because anyone handed it to her, but because she had stayed later, and tried harder, and delivered better than everyone who hadn't also been raising a child alone. She had chosen small because small was safe, because in a small place there was nowhere to hide something, no room for extra weight. She had moved into this apartment with 1 bag, a child, and the clean specific relief of someone who has finally stopped pretending she is not running. The letters started 2 months after Mira's birthday. The first one was on thick cream paper with a seal. She recognized the way you recognize a song from childhood. Not consciously, not immediately, but somewhere lower down, somewhere that doesn't ask permission. Her hands knew before her eyes did. She set it on the kitchen table, made coffee, stood at the window looking at the street below. She didn't open it. The second one arrived a week later. Same paper, same seal, different handwriting. Not his, which meant he had an assistant do it now, which meant he was being formal, which meant he was being patient. That was the thing she'd always known about him that she'd tried to forget. He was patient the way mountains are patient. Not passively, actively. Like patience was a choice he kept making with full knowledge of what it cost. She folded the second letter in half, used it as a bookmark in the novel she was reading. She finished the novel. Started another one. The letter moved from book to book. She did not open it. Her neighbor on the floor below was an older woman named Dora, who smelled like lavender and absolutely no nonsense. Dora had appointed herself Mira's grandmother, in the casual way certain older women claim children who need claiming. She brought biscuits. She watched Mira on Thursday evenings so Lena could go to her yoga class, which Lena had been attending for 2 years, and hated, and kept going to because the hating of it was the closest she got to meditation, something about suffering voluntarily with other people in a warm room. Dora never asked about Mira's father. This was the thing Lena loved most about her. Not that she didn't notice. She obviously noticed. She was 72 and had raised 5 children and had a radar for incomplete situations that could have detected submarines. She noticed, and she said nothing, and she brought biscuits. Lena had told Mira the simplest version of the truth, the version that was true without being complete. She had said, "Your dad and I knew each other before you were here, and we don't live near each other, and he doesn't know about you yet, And when the time is right, we will figure it out." Mira had nodded with the calm of a person who hasn't yet learned that this kind of answer is supposed to have feelings attached to it. "Okay," she had said. "Can I have juice?" "Yes," Lena had said, and had turned to the refrigerator so Mira couldn't see her face. She had left on a Tuesday. That was the detail she always came back to. Not why she left. She understood why she left. She had understood it completely in the moment, and continued to understand it in the years after, with increasing clarity and only occasional doubt. The why was something she had worked out a long time ago, turned over enough times to understand its shape, and set down. It was the Tuesday that stayed with her. The specific, ordinary weakness of it. She had not left during a fight, or after a revelation, or in the dramatic weather of some final argument. She had left on a Tuesday morning, which was itself a kind of cowardice, and a kind of courage, depending on how you looked at it. She had packed one bag. She had stood in the doorway of his bedroom while he slept, and she had looked at him for what she promised herself would be 1 minute. It was 4. Then she had picked up her bag and walked out, and she had not allowed herself to look back, because she knew if she looked back, she would see him in a way that would make leaving feel like murder. She found out she was pregnant 3 weeks later. She sat on the floor of a gas station bathroom in a town she was passing through and looked at the test and thought, with a calm that surprised even her, "Okay, we can do this. We are going to do this." She hadn't said we as in herself and the father. She had said we as in herself and the small improbable fact of the child who was just beginning. She had been right. They had done it. The third letter didn't come. He did. She heard the knock on a Saturday afternoon in December, while Mira was on the living room floor doing a puzzle with extreme focus and the particular commentary that 4-year-olds provide to themselves while they work. The rabbit was there. The juice glass was there. Lena was in the kitchen pretending to do something useful with her hands. She went to the door, opened it. He was standing in her hallway. He was wearing a dark coat she didn't recognize. He was exactly the same and completely different, and she could not have told you in that moment which of those two things was harder. She had a flash of something that her body produced without consulting her brain, something warm and involuntary, and immediately locked down. She said nothing. He said, "You didn't open the letters." "No," she said, "the first 2. I know how many I didn't open." He looked at her. The hallway was very quiet. She could hear Mira narrating something to herself in the living room, something about the puzzle being wrong, about a piece not fitting where it was supposed to. Lena's hand was on the door. It stayed there. "Can I come in?" he said. "No," she said. He accepted this the way he accepted most things, without performance, without making her feel anything about having said it. He just shifted his weight slightly and waited in the way she remembered, the way that was less about patience and more about certainty. Like he had already decided he had all the time he needed and was simply choosing how to use it. "Why are you here?" she said, not a question. The shape of a question, with the weight removed. "You know why, Cale, Lena." She had not said his name out loud in 4 years. She had thought it, at night, at odd moments, in the particular loneliness of being the only adult in a small apartment at 11 o'clock when Mira was asleep and the quiet had teeth. She had thought it, and refused to say it, as though keeping it unspoken kept it smaller. It wasn't smaller. She said, "I'm handling things." He said, "I know you are." Then why? And then Mira walked into the hallway. She came around the corner with the rabbit in one hand and one sock halfway off, which was a permanent condition, and she stopped when she saw the man at the door, because Mira took in new information the way she took in most information, with absolute stillness and no visible reaction, while all the processing happened somewhere behind her eyes. She looked up at him. He looked down at her. Lena watched this happen and felt something in her chest begin to move that she had been keeping still for 4 years. Not panic. Something below panic. Something older. His eyes went to the child's face and stopped. She knew what he was seeing. She had always known what anyone who knew him would see. She had seen it herself, the very first time Mira opened her eyes in the hospital. She had seen it, and she had known, and she had cried in the way you cry when something is true that you can't undo, the way you cry not from sadness, but from the sheer weight of a fact becoming permanent. Mira's eyes were gray, not a soft or common gray. A specific gray, the color of sky before weather decides what it's going to be, with a particular shape at the corners, a line, a structure, that belonged to one bloodline, his bloodline. She had seen it in his face, and his brother's face, and in the old photographs in the hall of the house she had lived in briefly and left forever. He stood very still. He was not a man who showed things easily. She had learned that about him slowly, the way you learn a language. First the vocabulary, then the grammar, then finally the thing underneath the grammar, that only happens when you stop translating and start understanding directly. She had spent long enough with him to know what his stillness meant. It meant he knew. It meant he had known the moment he saw her. Mira said, "Your coat is big." He looked down at her. Something happened at the edge of his expression. It didn't quite arrive. "It is," he said. "It's cold outside." Mira considered this with appropriate gravity. "It's not cold inside," she said. "No," he said. "It's not." She looked at him for another moment with those eyes. Then she turned and walked back into the living room, dragging the rabbit by one ear, unconcerned. Lena did not look at Cale. She looked at the wall to his left. The wall had a small scratch on it from when she'd moved the bookshelf last spring. She had been meaning to paint over it. She had not. "Come inside," she said. She didn't want to say it. Her mouth said it anyway. There was something about the way he was standing there knowing what he now knew, completely, without question, without her having had to say a single thing, that made the idea of making him stand in a hallway seem suddenly petty and beside the point. He came in. She closed the door. Mira was on the floor with her puzzle again. She looked up at Cale when he came in, with the same assessing look she gave all new things. The look that said she was deciding what category to put him in. "That's my rabbit," she told him. "I can see that," he said. "His name is Henry." "That's a good name." Mira seemed satisfied. She went back to the puzzle. Lena went to the kitchen because she needed to do something with her hands, and standing in the living room with nothing to do with her hands felt like standing in a room that was slowly running out of air. She put the kettle on. She did not offer him tea. She was not going to make this into tea. He stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room. He looked at the apartment, at the bookshelf with the books jammed in sideways, and the potted plant that was surviving through what could only be described as sheer stubbornness. At the row of Mira's shoes by the door, small shoes, specific shoes, shoes that were the size of something very young and real. He did not say anything. She didn't say anything either. She watched the kettle. The kettle took a very long time. "How old?" he said. "4, she said. "October." He was quiet. "She's healthy," Lena said, because she needed to say something, and that was the truest thing. She's very bright. She has opinions about waffles. She calls her rabbit Henry, and she refuses to explain why. She's fine. She's good. She stopped. The kettle boiled. She turned it off. She didn't make tea. "Lena, don't," she said. "I wasn't going to say anything you're afraid I'm going to say." She turned around and looked at him, and she thought, not for the first time and not for the last, that he was the only person she had ever met who could make her feel simultaneously like the most capable person in a room and also like someone who had been running so long they'd forgotten what stopping felt like. "What were you going to say?" she said. "I was going to ask," he said, "what she likes for breakfast." She looked at him. "Waffles," she said. "The box kind. She has a whole theory about the squares." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. "She gets that from somewhere," he said. "Don't," Lena said. "The structural analysis," he said. "The theory. She gets that from somewhere." She wanted to say something sharp. She had sharpness ready. She had been storing it for 4 years. The things she would say if this conversation ever happened. The arguments she would make. The ground she would hold. She had rehearsed this conversation in the shower, and in the car, and in the quiet after Mira went to sleep, in every version she had of herself that was still unresolved. None of the rehearsals had included him asking about waffles. She sat down at the kitchen table. She did not invite him to sit down. He sat down anyway. Not presumptuous. Just, at some point it became the obvious next thing, and he did it, and she didn't argue, because arguing about chairs seemed like the wrong battle. "You should have told me," he said. "I know," she said. She had expected that to be harder to say. She had expected to fight it, qualify it, explain it to death, the way she explained most things she was uncertain of. But it sat there simply, and it was just true. She should have told him. The fact that she hadn't was something she had made peace with in the only way you make peace with the things you chose that you can't unchose. By understanding why you chose it clearly enough that you can stop pretending you don't understand it. "I'm not here to make you feel bad about it," he said. "Good," she said. "Because I already feel bad about it." "Just the one thing," he said. "Not the leaving. I understood the leaving, eventually. I'm not saying I liked it. I'm saying I understood it. But not telling me about—" He stopped. "That's the thing." "I know," she said. "She's mine." It wasn't a question. It was never going to be a question. She had always known that if this moment came it would be this. No testing, no demanding proof, no performing the role of suspicious man. He would just look at his daughter's face and know, the way you know things that live in the blood and don't require confirmation. "She's mine," Lena said, "and I'm not going to fight you on that. She is. But she's also mine, and I have been—" She stopped, breathed. "I have been doing this. For 4 years I have been doing this, and it's been—" She didn't finish the sentence. He didn't rush her. He didn't fill the silence with something sympathetic that would have been worse than silence. He just waited in that way he had, that she had forgotten and now remembered in the same moment, like touching a bruise you'd stopped noticing. "Hard," she said finally. "It's been hard." "I know," he said. "You don't know," she said, "and there was no heat in it. You couldn't. That's not me being angry. That's just true. You weren't here. I didn't let you be here. So you don't know." "No," he said. "I don't." She looked at the table, at the scratch on the surface where Mira had once gone at it with a crayon before Lena had caught her. She'd scrubbed it, but the ghost of it was still there. These things always left ghosts. "I left," she said, "because I was getting small." He was quiet. "Not because of anything you did, not because of anything that happened. I was just getting small, and I could feel it. And I knew if I stayed I would keep getting small until there was nothing left to give to anyone, including—" She gestured vaguely in the direction of the living room, where they could both hear Mira apparently narrating a dispute between 2 puzzle pieces, "including her. And I know that sounds like an excuse. It doesn't," he said. "It might." "It doesn't." She looked up at him. He was looking back at her, the way he had always looked at her, with the full weight of his attention which had always felt, depending on the day, either like the most seen she had ever been, or like standing in front of something that could see everything she was trying to hide. Today it felt like both. "I made a choice," she said. "I made it alone when I should have made it with you. I was scared, and I was proud, and I was certain I could handle it, and I did handle it. I handled it fine, but I did it without telling you something you had every right to know, and that is the thing I'm sorry for. That specific thing." She said it once. She was not going to say it again. She was not a person who repeated apologies. He heard it. She could see him hear it. He didn't perform gratitude or forgiveness or anything. He just nodded once, the way he nodded when something had been received and processed and filed away in the part of him that kept things properly. "Okay," he said. "Okay?" she said. They sat in the kitchen for another 10 minutes and talked about nothing important. She told him that Mira was in her 2nd year of a small nursery she loved, that she had a best friend there, named a child Lena always called by the full and solemn nickname Mira had assigned him, the boy with the red lunchbox. That Mira did not sleep well before thunderstorms, that she could count to 30 but always skipped 17, every single time, and became annoyed if you pointed it out. He listened. He did not try to fast forward to consequences or decisions or plans. He was just listening to the outline of a small life that was also partly his, that he was hearing for the first time. She noticed him storing everything. That was the thing she had remembered. He stored. He did not take notes. He did not ask her to repeat herself. He just listened with the full presence of someone who expected to need everything he was being told. At some point, Mira appeared in the doorway. She looked at them both with the evaluating calm of a small person who has walked in on a conversation that has different air in it than normal conversations. "Are you staying for dinner?" she asked Cale. Cale looked at Lena. Lena looked at her daughter. "No," Lena said. "He has somewhere to be." "Oh," said Mira. She seemed neither pleased nor disappointed, just filing it under things that are true. "Okay." She looked at Cale. "Bye. Bye," he said. She went back to the puzzle. He stood at the door to leave, and Lena stood on the other side of it, and the distance between them was exactly the length of everything they hadn't said, which was considerable, and both of them knew it, and neither of them tried to cross it. "I'll come back," he said. "I know," she said. I'm not here to take anything from you, Lena. That's not what this is." "I know," she said. "I know who you are." That sat in the air between them. She meant it as something specific, and he heard it as something specific, and he didn't pretend otherwise. "She skips 17, he said. "Every time. And she gets annoyed if you mention it. Furious. Completely disproportionate. Something that was almost a smile. Not quite. Close enough." "Right," he said. "Right," she said. He left. She closed the door. She stood with her back against it for a moment. The apartment smelled like syrup, and the cold that had come in when the door was open. From the living room she could hear Mira, still at the puzzle, still narrating. 17 probably somewhere in the count she was using, and definitely skipped. Lena pushed off from the door, went to the kitchen. Her coffee was on the counter. It was cold. She didn't touch it. That night, after Mira was asleep, after the bath and the book and the 3 attempts at 1 more minute that always turned into 12 more minutes, Lena sat on the edge of the bathtub in the small yellow light of the bathroom, and she held herself together in the way she had learned to hold herself together, which was quietly and with both hands and without asking anyone to help. She was not crying. She had passed through the stage of crying about this a long time ago. What she was doing was something else, something without a clean word, a kind of reckoning with the fact that the thing she had been managing at a distance had arrived in her hallway wearing a coat she didn't recognize, and had looked at her daughter's face, and had simply known, and had not broken anything. That was the part she kept coming back to. She had built all her readiness against the version of this that broke something, the version with fury or demands or the cold machinery of someone exercising a right. She had been so ready for that version. He had asked about waffles. He had listened to her explain the rabbit's name and filed it away somewhere that she could see him filing it. She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. She thought, okay, we can do this. We, meaning herself, and him, and the small person asleep in the next room who skipped 17 every time and had opinions about waffle architecture, and whose eyes were the color of weather that belonged to someone she had loved in the reckless way that only works when you're not watching what it costs. She had watched what it cost. It had cost her 4 years of managing alone, and a kitchen full of cold coffee, and the particular loneliness of being right about a decision, while also knowing the decision had a hole in it you couldn't close. She pulled her hands from her eyes, stood up, turned off the bathroom light, went to check on Mira, the way she did every night, standing in the doorway for 30 seconds that always turned into a full minute, watching the small shape of her daughter breathe in the dark, the rabbit tucked under one arm, the blanket in its usual state of complete defeat. Mira's face was still in sleep, the jaw unclenched from the daily seriousness of being 4 years old, and there, even in the dark, the shape of her, the particular line of her, the angle of something in her features, sat like a fact that didn't need the light. Lena had never looked away from it, not once, not even on the hardest nights. She looked at it now. She pulled the door to, leaving it open just enough. She went to bed. In the morning, she thought, she would buy the good syrup, the real kind that came in a glass bottle. Mira would probably have opinions about that too. She was looking forward to hearing them.